Good morning, ladies and gentlemen,
Recording in progress.
and welcome to this webinar organized by the Parliamentary Research Unit, supported by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, an entity of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. We'll just give attendees another minute or so to join. We are flighting the agenda for you. And as I think at 1 or 2 minutes past 10, we will. I'll ask the first speaker to just do the opening and welcome. Just see more people are joining at the moment. So let me give them a chance. Okay, I think that we can start. Again, welcome to everybody who is online. Welcome to this webinar on the Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's the first of a series of webinars that we aim to hold. And it's being arranged by the Parliamentary Research Unit, as well as supported by the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, which is obviously an entity of the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. So for today's webinar, we have an exciting lineup for you, but I'd like to hand over first of all, well, the theme of today's, let me put that, the theme of today's webinar is the impact of 4IR technologies. So the intent is to give you an overview of what is happening in this space, and in that way to set the scene for future webinars along these topics as well. So let me hand over first of all to Mr. Morowe for the opening and welcome. Mr. Morowe is a researcher at the South African Parliament. Over to you, Mr. Morowe.
Thank you very much, Doc, for such an introduction. Good morning, colleagues. Program Director, it is my Dr. Karen, I'm not sure if you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. There's a
We
message
can
that
hear you.
Thank you very much. There's a message that pops, so I was wondering what's happening. Program Director. It is my honor and privilege to extend my warmest greetings to and heartfelt welcome to the Deputy Speaker of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Dr. Anneli Lotriet, the Division Manager of the Parliament Research Unit, Dr. Leon Gabriel, Deputy Director General from the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, Dr. Mboneni. Just something keeps on popping on my screen. Program Director, I don't know what is happening here.
We can see you.
Yes, the CSIR colleagues led by Dr. Karen Coltier, who is an impact area manager, CSIR senior researcher Dr. Lotriet Marais, acting Deputy Director General ICT Policy Development and Research at the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, Mr. Alfred Moto, Mr. Jay Moodley, a senior AI and researcher, Dr. Matadin, who is the manager of the Center for Robotics and Future Production, honorable members of Parliament of the Republic of South Africa in their various capacities, academics, professional staff at Parliament, members of the media houses, community stakeholders from different sectors in South Africa, all protocol observed. Program Director, it's a great privilege to welcome you all this morning as we mark a historic moment, the first ever launch of the Fourth Industrial Revolution webinar series, which is proudly hosted by the Education and Recreation Cluster in Parliament. This platform is designed to ignite meaningful dialogue on how we as a nation comprising of myriad sectors can harness the power of technology to shape a future that is innovative, inclusive, and global competitive. Program Director, as we embark on this journey, this inaugural webinar series will focus on 4 key sectors that are essential to achieving our government strategic objectives and priority plans. The focal sectors are basic education, sport, arts and culture, higher education, as well as science, innovation, and technology. The primary aim of this webinar is to explore the transformative impact of technology in these sectors, with a special focus on how embracing digital innovation can empower the youth, create economic opportunities, and strengthen our global standing. We live in an era where technological adaptation is no longer a choice, but a necessity. To remain competitive in the global arena, South Africans, especially the young people, ought to actively endorse, adopt, as well as be innovative in the space of using digital tools to drive economic progress. Program Director, once again, on behalf of the Education and Recreation Cluster, please allow me to extend my heartfelt gratitude to all who have joined us today. Your participation reaffirms our collective commitment to fostering engagement, collaboration, and bold ideas that will shape the future of our nation in the digital age. I therefore urge and encourage all the participants to feel free to engage, contribute, and immerse yourselves in this thought-provoking conversation. Program Director, with those words, thank you very much. I welcome everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morowe. Colleagues, with those welcoming, I couldn't have put it better, those welcome words. I would like to now invite our first keynote of this series of webinars to be presented by the Honorable Dr. Annelie Lotriet. Dr. Lotriet is well known in the language and education sphere. Annelie, I can't believe we have to meet in this way again, but I'm not going to tell them how many years it's been. We have done exciting things together in the past, but it is wonderful to have Dr. Lotriet now playing this pivotal role also within our new government, and where since last year, Dr. Lotriet is the country's first deputy speaker from an opposition party since 1996. So welcome, Dr. Lotriet. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And yes, Karen, it's very nice to see you, albeit in a different capacity. Good morning, everyone. It is such a privilege to be here, and I've also interacted with some of you in my previous capacity during the 5th administration with science and technology in Parliament. But I want to thank you for inviting me to address this introductory webinar on the 4th Industrial Revolution, or 4IR. Awareness raising and capacity building initiatives like these are incredibly important for members of Parliament and parliamentary officials to remain up to date with societal developments and the impact on the citizens Parliament represents. I also appreciate the collaboration with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research and would like to thank our CSIR colleagues for supporting this initiative. The 4IR is transforming our daily lives with digitalization. Technologies like artificial intelligence, cloud computing, robotics, and 3D printing are becoming increasingly prevalent. AI models specifically, such as ChatGPT and more recently DeepSeek, have taken the world by storm. When OpenAI released ChatGPT on 30 November 2022, the chatbot went viral on social media. In just 2 months, its users reached 100 million, excitedly sharing how ChatGPT can hold discussions, write articles, jokes, school assignments, and even poetry in response to prompts. Now, this phenomenon raises important questions about the responsible and safe use of 4IR technologies. These technologies hold incredible potential for human and socio-economic development. Integrating smart technologies in various sectors enhances productivity, reduces resource waste, fosters economic development, and enables better decision-making. It can also lead to improved quality of life by boosting healthcare, designing smarter cities, and providing enhanced services, while also contributing to sustainability through optimized resource usage and reduced environmental footprint. But on the other hand, we cannot ignore the risks. 4IR technologies raises fears of job displacement due to automation and AI, the unequal distribution of technological benefits, and widening of existing economic disparities. It increases risks of cybersecurity threats that jeopardize privacy and security, and also raises ethical concerns about AI and surveillance misuse. Regulatory challenges are also becoming widespread as laws have been unable to keep pace with rapid technological developments. Our lack of digital infrastructure and necessary skills further exacerbate these risks. Parliamentarians and parliamentary officials are entrusted with lawmaking and government oversight. It is essential for us to ensure the responsible use of these technologies while mitigating all other risks. In 2023, at the 147th Interparliamentary Union Assembly, I vividly recall the chilling expert hearing on the social and humanitarian impact of autonomous weapon systems and artificial intelligence, which have the capability to operate without direct human control or supervision. The advancements discussed showcased how decisions on life and death are shifting from humans to opaque algorithms, raising serious concerns about human rights. While the 4IR has positive aspects, these types of discussions highlight the critical need for technological regulation across policy areas. The 2024 AI Index report from Stanford University finds that there has been a noticeable surge in AI-related legislation worldwide. Over the period from 2016 to 2023, parliaments in 127 countries passed a combined total of 123 bills that reference AI. These regulations cover a range of issues such as educational reforms, ensuring fairness and non-discrimination in AI algorithms, and setting up AI education initiatives. This demonstrates a growing acknowledgement of the need for structured regulatory guidelines to oversee the ethical advancement and use of AI technologies. In South Africa, although certain activities involving AI are governed by existing legislation and efforts are underway towards future regulation, most AI operations remain unregulated. The 2020 report of the Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution highlights key sectors in South Africa where 4IR technologies can be employed to improve services and other outcomes. These include energy, water, sanitation, agriculture and biodiversity management, health, and mining, to name but a few. The report also makes recommendations, of which the review, amendment or creation of policy and legislation is one. It states that the regulatory environment must be adapted to enable the desired progress. And this exercise requires the legislature to be trained to become science literate in order to implement changes that are holistic, integrating the specific logistics of technologies, the industries they impact, the people who will both consume and produce them, and the agility requirements to compete on a global stage. And it is in this light that I appeal to members of Parliament, committee researchers and content advisors to keep 4IR developments and policy implications on your committee's radars. Be proactive and following local and international 4IR policy narratives related to your subject areas. Continue collaborating with colleagues and experts from organizations like the CSIR and others to gather diverse and informed perspectives. Bring tough questions to your committee's attention to ensure the ethical and transparent use of these new technologies. Parliament must do its part in narrowing the gap between technological developments and their responsible application. And Program Facilitator, it is on that note that I express my appreciation and support for today's webinar and subsequent sessions on the 4IR. And I wish you all fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lotriet. Much appreciated. I think you have given us a lot of food for thought and really touched on many of the pertinent issues that we need to discuss in this and future webinars. Thank you for that. Colleagues, with those few words, we've heard from Honorable Dr. Lotriet. I would now like to hear from, to hand over to Dr. Mboneni Mofe for some introductory remarks. Dr. Mofe is the DDG for Socio-Economic Innovation Partnerships at the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation in South Africa. I don't think Dr. Mofe needs much introduction. He's very well known in the field, and he also has years of experience in the South African science, technology and innovation system and the global innovation systems in general, including doing scientific research himself, managing research, managing international cooperation, managing development and implementation of innovation funding schemes, which is always very critical to the work that we do, and implementing various innovation initiatives. Some of these were large, like the National Space Science Strategy. With that small introduction, Dr. Mofe, it doesn't do you justice, but I hand over to you for some opening remarks.
Thanks very much. Good morning, and I hope that I'm audible. Am I audible? Okay.
You are perfectly audible.
No, thanks very much. Just to avoid the risk of doing what you have done, Karen, I think that in your declaration of interest in terms of how long ago you know Dr. Lotriet, you didn't tell us everything. And to avoid not falling into your trap, I will declare fully. Dr. Lotriet has been my boss as the member of the Portfolio Committee of Science, Technology and Innovation some years back. And she continues to be even a bigger boss now with a new role as the Deputy Speaker. And I really just want to start this by applauding your leadership in terms of just making sure that we really have time to focus in discussing this particular critical matter on our country, the issue of 4IR. I think we have really moved from a point where we talk about 4IR as this coming force that is going to impact on us and on our economy, to a point where now we are at the eye of this 4IR. There is a number of challenges that we need to really look at. There are also opportunities. And I think what we need to know is that maybe contrary to what we may have thought initially, is that we actually cannot control the pace, or we don't have an option of not really wanting to get ready and prepare to play in this big base of 4IR. It's just here and we just need to play, or else we get left behind and the consequences are quite dire. So what is this 4IR? It is really the rise in the aspect of usage of data, connectivity, analytics, the human-machine interaction, and also the whole issue now, as you see in the manufacturing space, robotics. And there are a number of technologies that are really driving it. And I really want to acknowledge that we have actually tended to focus on one, We've got the aspect of predictive analysis, additive manufacturing, which is very crucial in industry, artificial intelligence, which I think everything seems to be revolving around it now, but there is really much more that actually also enable artificial intelligence within 4IR that we need not leave behind. The aspect of Internet of Things, and when we talk about data, we also need to really bring on board the aspect of cloud computing and the issue of smart sensors. Now, why is this so important for government? Government has got to be the one that drives and enable 4IR, including now as we talk about the impact of the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. Dr. Lotriet did mention a lot of opportunities and challenges. And I think that we see opportunities, but the biggest of the opportunities that we need to reap as government, we haven't been able to. Because when you look at what 4IR can do in terms of efficiencies in government, how we do things, how we plan, how we even develop policies, is that everything just become much more efficient if we begin to accommodate the 4IR technologies. However, there are a number of things that we need to start doing to make sure that we enable 4IR, and especially these technologies that are very ruthless in nature if we haven't positioned ourselves to be active participants in. One of the challenges that we need to address is the issue of connectivity and infrastructure. And this is really looking at things even like data storage, how we actually collect our data, because ultimately when we talk about the power of the fourth industrial revolution, it's going to be based on the kind of data we collect, the quality thereof, where we store it, how accessible is it, and lastly and most critically, how secure and safe it is, because data in the hands of wrong people is actually a very, very dangerous tool. So we therefore need to also look at those aspects around the issue of data security. When we talk about the impact of artificial intelligence, for example, much as we talk about the advantages, some of the disadvantages, and one of which Dr. Lotriet mentioned, is the issue of cyber security. When we talk about cybercrime, artificial intelligence has actually created a lot of benefit for thugs, to an extent that today it is mentioned that if cyber crime was to be a state, it will actually be the third biggest economy in the world. And this is really how some of these challenges are and how we need to navigate them. So in government, we see the power of these technologies in terms of policy making, in terms of implementation of policies, because then you do everything on the basis of evidence. We also look at it because in government, we have got all kinds of important data that you may need to do what you want to do. As we're sitting here, we're talking, people are getting born, that's data. People are dying, that's data. People are going to hospitals, that's data. People are traveling up and down, people are transacting, that's data that we can draw and begin to then use as a powerful tool to enable us to do a lot of things, including how we can actually fight crime, how we can plan in terms of the economics of our country, to even go to the micro levels to say, in this particular area, based on the data that we have, we can actually have the following interventions, because the data that we have tells us that there are so many people who are uneducated and so many who are educated, and these are the areas in which they are educated. So what kind of economic opportunities can we bring in a particular area? So that's really the power that we can have through this kind of data. Then we need to also look at how do we, after we have created that backbone or the scaffolding, where you talk about infrastructure, education being very critical, and the aspect of 4IR in education is actually like a double-edged sword. It's how 4IR enables education and how education itself enables 4IR. For example, when we talk about skills, we are then able to make sure that when we've got digital skills within our communities, it also enables them to adopt and be able to bring those efficiencies, whether it is in their establishments, whether it is us taking this into education, and then also how we can use these technologies to make sure that some of the challenges of education that we have can actually be minimized. For example, when we talk about the lack of science and math teachers, when we use 4IR-enabled technologies, we can be able to use one teacher to reach out to more than one institution or more than one schools. And this can actually become very crucial in especially our rural areas. But ultimately, we cannot do that unless there is connectivity. And that's really why these sort of things are really creating these kind of cycles of interdependencies, where one thing breaks down, it actually impacts everything. And this is how it is important to make sure that the ecosystem is fixed and is functional. And the work that we're doing, for example, through the CSIR, when you look at the building of what we call the foundational digital capabilities, it enables us as a country to be able to say we are now having those backbone structure on the basis of which you can really begin to put all the flesh together. And I hope that as we engage today, we are going to be able to say, what are those other things that we can bring into this role? Because if we don't do this, there's going to be a whole lot of challenges. When we talk about threats of what we call the convergence or the singularity, we're moving into a space where, because of the many sources of information, some of which aren't even regulated, we actually don't even know what is true and what is not true. We can have deep fakes where people can put words in your mouth and it is so real and authentic that unless we realize that even in the involvement and in us adopting these technologies, there is still going to be the need for human intervention. But that kind of intervention cannot happen if we haven't also pushed the aspect of digital education. So I think that as I close this off and move to the next phase, I want to say this is really, for me, a very exciting step forward from the leadership at the Parliament in terms of us making sure that we put forward this whole aspects of 4IR into perspective, discuss, look at the pitfalls, look at the possibilities and the opportunities, and build on them, because our existence and success as a country is going to be dependent on how well we adapt and adopt these technologies and begin to move in the 4IR, adopting all these things, including artificial intelligence and its power, but then at the same time minimizing the negative impact on society. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mofe. Profound thoughts, and I especially like your indication of the symbiotic relationship that there is between education and 4IR. And I think that is actually a very nice segue for us into our next item on the program, and that is the flighting of a video that centers on an application or a technology that the CSIR has been developing. This is just one thing of all the work that CSIR does, but it is in the education space, and it specifically aims to promote literacy, early literacy among students. And as we know, that is really the foundation for learning and for skills development and eventually getting a job in the job market. So I think both in terms of how do we get technology in the hands of people, and even, that where connectivity is a problem, how do we address that? This is one example of an application that can be rolled out to parents, but also to schools, and enable some early literacy development. So with those few words, I would like our team to please flight the video for us, and then we'll go into the panel discussion directly thereafter. Thank you.
Good morning, Karen. I'm struggling to share, so if I can just be allowed to share, that would be great. To clarify, I think it's an issue of yeah, it seems like something is happening. Let's try again. Okay, we're good.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you.
8 out of 10 foundation phase children cannot read for basic meaning in their home language. So literacy is a bit of a crisis in South Africa, and we need scalable and reliable solutions. Language technology could potentially help relieve that problem, and we've decided to apply our technology in this domain to solve some of that. Peladi Nakene is in Mamelodi, so it's close to the CSIR, and we've been piloting at the school since the beginning of this year.
Ke khonne ge ba fitla mo Peladi ke khonne o lemoga gore di tablet tse ba re tliseditseng tsona di khona go thoma ka modumo ngwana o khona go tseba ge mmotsa gore khotla modumo wa a wa khotla modumo wa a e khona go dira gore ngwana a lemoge gore le ntšule ke le beile mo le lokile go ba aowa.
Because it's important to understand whether this application is actually working for them. It doesn't help us if we develop technology and in principle or in theory it could work, but it doesn't really translate to the real world. So we brought the tablets here so that the kids can actually use the application and she can tell us how it's been going and whether it's been working for her or not. Also, her feedback in terms of what's not working is really valuable because that allows us to improve what we do. So we've used picture dictionaries from the lexicography units of South Africa to develop the words that are in the application, and we use our natural language technology to generate sentences using those words that are grammatically correct and make sense.
Automatic speech recognition wenza ukuthi umuntu ekwazi ukufunda igama elibhaliwe bese umshini uyakwazi ukulifunda njengoba linjalo bese lisende ku back end bese liyascore kunikeza iscore ukuthi wenze kahle noma wenze kabi.
The application has a few different kinds of activities, and it's been gamified to some degree to encourage learners to engage with the content. So they can listen to automatically generated speech in 2 of the languages. So either that would be their home language or the target language, which in this case would be English. Sometimes they listen to Sepedi and they have to reconstruct in Sepedi. That's simply just listening and reading. But there's also the meaning component where they have to listen to maybe a Sepedi sentence, understand it, and then also understand the English words that are popping up that they need to reconstruct the translation, or the other way around.
Ke mo modi o thomang ko teng wa go ruta bana mo go baleng di tablet tse di thusa bana ba rena gore ba di thoma ka re thoma go ba ruta ka medumo go bane he ngwana a tseba modumo o tlo khona go bopa mantšu go ba kaone gore a khone go ba bobebe mo go yena gore a khone go bopa mantšu ga bopile mantšu o khona go bopa mafokwana ale a khone go mo thusa gore a bope mafoko a matelele a kwishishegalang a na leng matlakogedi.
And lokho ngibona kuyigebe elikhulu noma there's a big gap kumele siyivale ngalokho, and lama tools sesiwakhandile ngiyakwazi ukuthi siwa deploy bese bayasebenzisa emaklasini ekwazi ukuyehlisa le gebe elikhona.
We are currently in the 3rd year of a 3-year project that is sponsored by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture towards this literacy development support. So we are hoping to make a difference in South Africa in this literacy space, and we've chosen a few languages to start off this project with, but we are really hoping to get more funding so that we can roll this out to more languages and more schools, because we really think that our technology could potentially make a difference in this very important and strategic issue of foundation phase literacy in mother tongue education.
re leboga ba CSIR gore ba tlile ba tlo re bontsha gore ga se ka puku fela le technology ya kgona go ruta ngwana go bala le go ngwala le go kwešiša.
Thank you very much, Lotriet. So colleagues who are on the webinar, I think that is just a glance into some of the things that are possible when we apply 4IR technology to solve challenges in the country. Colleagues, we're now moving over to the part of our program that is dedicated to the panel discussion. And before we go into that, let me first say that we have a Q&A available at the bottom of your screens. There should be a Q&A button that would open up a chat box where you can put any questions that you might have. And I invite you to put questions both for the keynote address and introductory remarks and the video as well there. And we will ask the relevant presenters to respond to those. Feel free. We also have a chat box. We see the chat box as more enabling you to connect with some of your colleagues, do some networking, share your contact details, and so on. And we will then address that, but we'll address the questions, specific questions that you have. We'll address those in the Q&A chat box. All right, so with that, Lotriet, I think that you can stop sharing from your side, or am I misunderstanding that you're still sharing? So we can see the...
I thought I had stopped sharing.
Sorry. I think I'm still seeing your screen. Anyway, it's not a problem. So colleagues, we've already heard from DDG Mofe. Our panel consists of DDG Mofe, DDG Alfred Moto from the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. Let me flight the agenda and see if I can... It makes more sense. Sure. I'm just trying to get us back to the agenda, please, colleagues. Whoever was flighting the agenda, could you flight that again, please? Yes, so panel members are Dr. Mofe from DSTI, Mr. Alfred Moto from the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies. And then you've heard Lotriet already in the video, and she is also on our panel today. Mr. Jay Moodley, he is a senior researcher at the CSIR as well, focusing on extended reality and artificial intelligence. And we have Dr. Sunveer Matadin, who is the manager for the Center for Robotics and Future Production. Right, so at that, having said that, I think I'll ask questions of each of the panel members, and there will be a short slot for them to then respond to those questions. But if you have any questions that you would like to ask from the participants, from the audience side, please feel free to raise your hand. We will acknowledge your hands, and please also feel free to use the Q&A box if you want to add any questions there, and we will try to address them. So Dr. Mofe, my question to you is, we've now heard from both your opening remarks as well as the video and the remarks from Dr. Lotriet that AI is really, it's here to stay. It's bringing in incredible new changes to the way that we do things. But are we ready for it? do we have policies in place to be able to make sure that access to 4IR technologies is inclusive, that we don't widen the digital divide instead of narrowing it? And what are we doing in terms of upskilling people to prepare the workforce for the changing job landscape?
Yeah, so I think the big question is, as you said, are we ready? And I think we, just typical South Africans, we've got a bit of everything. So we got pockets where you can say that we're ready. I mean, when you look at some sectors, even in industry, and even some aspects in government, by the way, you find that there are areas that we can pick and say we are doing well, and there are areas where we can say we probably aren't doing that well. And I think when we look at the private, and then I want to, when I speak at how one of the companies here, and there are many, but this one because perhaps most of us would interact with in terms of our insurance and fitness. When we look at how Discovery uses artificial intelligence to be where it is, it just shows you that this is a company that can actually match up anybody anywhere in the world in terms of making use of and being at the center of 4IR. But we also have a lot of things that we need to fix. And the biggest things globally, and this is really not just a South African phenomenon, but I think Africa and us being in Africa, the biggest challenge is when we talk about the state of readiness, we also need to look at how, where do we anchor these technologies? These technologies, by and large, are anchored on data. And if we are not generators and contributors to data, then ultimately we are going to find ourselves complaining about what we call issues of ethics and AI bias and everything, because the data that the machines learn and do predictions, all those models are based on the kind of data where they learn from. So if you want to learn, and I always say, if you want to learn, or if you want generative AI to do something for you in Afrikaans, we got to ask ourselves the question, how much of Afrikaans data do we have out there where these models are going to learn and draw from? And the little you have, it means that the more you are going to have in terms of bias, because it's gonna always pick up from the dominant language or data sets that it has, and it is not gonna be whether it's Afrikaans, whether it is Zulu or Chivenda, whatever. And for us to begin to do that, is to work on how do we, even in terms of languages, begin to make sure that our languages are part of this system. And I really like the work that, for example, University of Pretoria through Professor Maribata is doing, and also the work in the CSIR, you would know about that in terms of just beginning to build, that's what we call it, the foundational digital capabilities, beginning to build that so that when we ask AI to do things for us, AI is able to learn and pick data from what is going to be relevant to us. That's the first thing. The second thing is on the skill side. We've got a pilot going on in the CSIR, what we call the Learning Factory. And this is basically about, especially when we look at the teaching and learning in TVET colleges, you're not going to be teaching people how to fix a car by hanging an engine on a tree, but by how the robots actually work and how, using ICTs, you can be able to pick exactly where the problem is and go and solve the problem, as opposed to thinking and then spending the whole day trying to figure out what the problem is. So I think the whole education system also needs to then begin to be problem-solving oriented. It's going to help us a lot in terms of building the skills. So that is really why one of the things we're talking about is what is going to be the skills of the future that will enable us to do things as opposed to what we're looking at now. Policy-wise, I think my colleague from the Department of Communication and Digital Technologies will talk more about that. But I do think that generally we find that globally policy is lagging behind the technology development. But there is work that is going on, for example, around the various policies and strategies on AI, which I think maybe he can talk to. But I do think that we need to really move at speed in terms of building our data sets in a manner that is going to make us relevant as players in the 4IR space.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Morfe. I think those are true words. I see there is also a question in the Q&A about how long it would take to develop a highly inclusive policy for AI use in universities. If there is anybody in the webinar who would like to attempt a response to that, you are most welcome by responding to the Q&A. I don't know if we have anybody on the panel who specifically would like to respond to that. You can put up your hand.
Yeah. I can respond to that,
Yes.
not because I'm an expert, but just because I think one of the dangers around this is to think that we can pretend that these technologies don't exist and that they have taken over. And we have seen that a couple of years back when we were launching another application in the health space, the universities were complaining that this is going to be giving too much information to medical students that they may not necessarily need if they have this app, because it will amount to cheating. Now, what we need to do is at academic institutions, we need to be able to say, how do we actually accommodate these technologies in a manner that we appreciate that they are there? I mean, no matter how much you want, you are not going to take me to a point where I have to type my thesis using a typewriter and then give it to somebody to. So we now have spell checks and everything. So we must have to live with the reality that people are going to have their assignments written by ChatGPT or whatever new generative technologies will be. But the question is, what work do they do, for example, in making sure that they avoid the challenges around factual inaccuracies, making sure that you still bring that human element to show that you have done your work? That's the one thing. The second thing is, how do you also make sure that whatever you get from these technologies, it actually helps you to formulate and do and take better decisions, as opposed to saying, this machine has done it for me, therefore I'm just going to consume it. Because the danger of artificial intelligence as it grows is that when the learning becomes so complicated that it starts to learn from itself, that's when you're going to have the challenge around what some would call it will bring a lot of hallucinations, because it is teaching itself things, and then where there are mistakes and errors, those actually also get multiplied. And in the end, you may end up with a much low quality product than you thought you would have. So I think we need to accommodate them, but also regulate the extent to which the human intervention in what these technologies are going to do will actually do to make sure that the actual product is actually more enhanced. So these technologies are not there to take over, but they are there to assist and to make life easy.
Fully agreed. There's another question for you, Dr. Morfe. Don't run away. There is a question from Adrian Roos of the DA. He asks, through the South Africa Alliance, South Africa has agreed to champion the development of the AI for Africa blueprint, laying the foundation for the African continental AI strategy. This was launched in June 2024 through South Africa, though South Africa itself has not yet developed a national AI strategy. do any of the panelists or presenters know where we are with developing a national AI strategy?
Yeah, so I know that there's been a lot of progress made on the development of the strategy. Ourselves working with the DCDT and the CSIR. So I know that there is a draft somewhere which is very close to being a final product. So we have done that. And I think that that is a very important question because we cannot just fly without any direction in this area, because then ultimately you're going to crash or you are going to find yourself just flying around in circles. So that work is quite advanced, and very soon we should probably be talking about a product being out there that we can really engage with, and where there are gaps, we can continue to fill them. And I think the biggest challenge around policy development and strategies in the fast-moving pace is that we need to agree that some of these strategies and technologies are going to be living documents, and which we're going to improve and get better with it at time. But the danger is we must never fold our hands and say we aren't going to do anything.
Fully agree. Thank you very much. Colleagues, there's another question with regard to policy. So I think I'm going to just read that out. It's for Dr. Lotriet, and it reads, does Parliament or members of Parliament and staff have the capacity, i.e. skills, understanding and financial resources to adequately regulate AI technologies? And what is the vision of Parliament in relation to the AI ecosystem over the next 5 years? Dr. Lotriet, are you able to respond to that? Oh, she might have needed to step away just for a moment. All right, let's park that one then. And I would, Alfred, yes? Mr. Mutu, go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Carto. My name is Alfred Mutu, as you have indicated. The issue of regulating in a technology-driven environment also, it is a challenge that we acknowledge exists, but I think that by far the biggest challenge in our environment becomes the way we develop policies and legislation, because in a technology-driven environment, you need that level of agility to be able to respond appropriately. But a constitutional requirement for developing policies to make sure that you comprehensively consult all stakeholders. There are these processes that when you look at them, you also have to start asking, are these processes helpful to enabling us to adapt our policy and regulatory environment to technology evolution? So there are those specific challenges that we need to acknowledge. But perhaps for me, the other important thing was when we talk about 4IR, we need to start breaking it down to simple concepts that many industries can start to understand. We need to lift it off from that level of academic discussions to your ordinary language that every South African can understand. And I liked that video specifically for where they're directly talking, the Zulu, the Spedi, and that's how we need to start simplifying not only the technologies, but the way we communicate in such a way that we can. Because what I liked about what Dr. Lotriet said was about inclusiveness. And in South Africa, you cannot really talk about policy or any kind of enablement without talking about inclusiveness, because there is always that fear that you might not intentionally find yourself excluding other people just by the language you use, that just by the issue of access to resources. That's why Dr. Mofe was talking about digital infrastructure. You can talk about all these things at any level, but if you do not have connectivity, you might as well forget. You can talk about these things for as long as you do not have access to affordable devices, you'll just be catering for the elite who already have everything. So in terms of policy, we also, because again, in a digital environment, in a digitally transforming environment, policy cannot only be the only lever. Like I said, the way you develop policies, you have to balance developing policy and enabling innovation. You are not going to police everything. Sometimes you need to let innovation happen, observe the patterns, and say, as government, what is my role in policy development? What is it? It is to ensure that citizens enjoy protection. It is to ensure that there is economic inclusion. Those are critical areas. So when you want to ensure that happens, that's why I talk about digital infrastructure. That's why I talk about digital skills. But most importantly, which also Dr. Mofe raised, is issues of data protection, data privacy, cybersecurity. Because right now you'd find that in most instances, people are not able to use technologies because they still don't, there's not that digital trust environment that we have adequately created. Some people can't use internet banking. They cannot use e-commerce platforms because they think their money will disappear. So there is that part of policy development, but there is that part of communicating, that part of creating awareness. We say we have POPIA, we have Cyber Crimes Act, but how many South Africans leverage those policies to be able to protect themselves, to be able to protect their interests, to be able to uplift their lives? So as we look at policy, we should also look at it in terms of how it can enable, not just protect, because to be protected, you need to know what you need to be protected about. So if you are able to transact online, then you need to know that these are the protections you need. But at a point where you are not even able to participate in all these activities, you will not be able to understand what importance of protection is, because all you're going to do is come with the fancy AI policy, and then, but still no one understands. You need to, at a basic level, say, what does POPIA mean? What does Cyber Crimes Act mean? What does all these policies mean? And how can you leverage them to be a participant in the digital economy? To me, that's how I need policy to be understood. Because right now we got the data and cloud policy. I don't know how many of you are aware of it. It is basically intended to ensure that every South African can be able to leverage data to improve their lives, whether you innovate, whether you develop informed evidence-based policy making, everything. It is intended to enable that. But at the end of the day, we also need to come to a level where we help South Africans to understand what are these policies, what are they supposed to do. In PC4R itself, we need to break it down to the level of an ordinary man. Because if we don't, I mean, I go around and ask, hey, what happened to PC4R? Because they looked at it as a pie in the sky. So how do you simplify it? How do we break it down to a level where an ordinary person understands what we are talking about so that they can be part of the conversation? Or else you're going to leave it to...
100%.
Thank you.
Mr. Moto, I think that you've already taken up your 5 minutes of panel discussion, but not a problem. Would you just like to switch on your video and maybe just give us a few words, 2-3 sentences on what the department is doing, the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies is doing to regulate the rapid pace of this development? If you wouldn't mind switching on your video, please. We also want to see how you look, not just for the benefit of your wise words.
Well, I interact with Dr. Mofe once in a while. Yeah. No, thank you. Obviously, you pick up that I'm passionate, but like I've said, to me, everything we do or say should appeal to the ordinary man. We need to make things. But from a policy perspective, what we have done, I mean, like I say, it is more about enablement. That's why I was talking about digital infrastructure, especially connectivity. But so every South African citizen need to be connected. That's why we promulgated the SA Connect policy, and this is what we are currently implementing. But we are also recognizing that there could be an opportunity for amending it. I'll talk about amendments on a later stage. And then we also got, like I have indicated, we got a data and cloud policy, which is beginning to try to open up and create an understanding about what data can do, based on what Dr. Mofe was saying, that you need to create an environment. That's why we talk about, when you look at the policy, you find that we talk about digital infrastructure, we could talk about skills, we talk about creating a digital trust environment. This is very crucial because, like I'm saying, you want everybody to be able to be involved in all this technological enablement, but starting with simple basic things like being able to transact online, so that you don't have people queuing at the banks. You know, all this stuff. Sometimes when I look at people queuing for grants, it is really, you can imagine the amount of time they waste in their lives that they will never get back just by queuing there. So they need to be enabled to utilize digital technologies, most of whom have. So digital technologies, there should be an understanding that it's not about watching TikTok, it's not about doing WhatsApp, but it is an equipment that you can actually use to improve your life. If you go to a smartphone and look at the amount of data and analytics that it does and inform you about your different patterns, whether you buy or you travel and so forth, you can realize that this is not just an equipment for entertainment, but it's an equipment that you can use to improve your life. So from a policy, but what we are trying to do, because that's why I had to allude to the issue of saying developing a policy in this environment can be actually restrictive. So what we have tried to, we are moving towards, I don't want to preempt the announcement that my minister would be making in future. But what we are trying to do is to bring all industry stakeholders, obviously also including non-industry stakeholders, to say, let's collectively start a process of developing policy, but doing it in such a way that we are all collaborating at the level of policy conceptualization, policy identification, so that by the time we move in unison, because the way we've been developing policies was to do the process on our own. Once we have reached a certain level, we start consulting, and that's where you find that the conflicts arise. So we're saying now we want to start together right from the beginning. So you'll have industry stakeholders, you'll have scientists like yourselves, then you have ordinary people, other society groups. So that conceptualization, we believe, could be one of the interventions that would assist us to start developing policy collaboratively, but also making sure that it responds to the needs of the environment, but most importantly, to make sure that it happens quicker than it is happening now, because sometimes we take about 3 years to develop policy.
Indeed.
So we because we know that the challenge I have identified personally and with my colleagues about 4IR is that I think we underestimated the level of collaboration and cooperation we needed to do. So there are so many things happening in agriculture and everywhere.
And only one province, that
Thank
is
you.
the Eastern Cape.
Thank you.
For some.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Moto. I think very good points made. And I must say, I think everybody is eagerly watching the space for a more collaborative policy development initiative. Colleagues, I'm just aware of time, so I would suggest that we move on to our next panelist. Our next panelist is Dr. Lotriet Marais. So you've seen Lotriet and some of the work that she is doing at the moment with the Ngiyaqonda app. Lotriet is very interested in seeing how one can apply technology to solve some of the big challenges that we have in the country. And she happens to be really good at it. But Lotriet, I would like to ask you, do you want to tell us a little bit more about Nyakonda on the one hand, but then also about how you think that that can help us to address some of the educational challenges that we are facing in the country? Over to you.
Thank you so much, Karen. I hope you can hear me. All right. So I want to start by acknowledging what everyone else has said, in the sense that artificial intelligence is something that has really burst onto the scene in the last few years. Basically, almost everything about it is the fact that it's reached normal human beings in the form of something like ChatGPT. And suddenly we are all very much aware of it and the possibilities, both good and bad. So before I get to the good, perhaps it's useful to just think a bit about the what we might describe as the bad possibilities surrounding AI. That could be, as mentioned, criminals using artificial intelligence to scam people who are even, innocently thinking they are communicating with a human when they're not, or something like that. But then also the possibility of massive job losses due to the fact that computers have acquired skills that have typically been the domain of humans. And then what role does regulation or lawmaking play in this? So I would like to kind of propose a metaphor for this. If you think of society as a body, I would say that regulations and laws are perhaps to a body what medicine or vitamin supplements or exercise regimes are. Things that are applied externally, that intend to foster health or improve health or prevent illness and so on. And if we think of these dangers that we see with AI, perhaps we can think of them as an illness of some kind. But honestly, none of those interventions would work without a body having an immune system. An immune system I take to be the organic ability of a body to respond to threats. And that's really actually where the technology that we are developing and the way we are applying it comes in. Because I would argue that something like literacy and education is the immune system of a body against threats that are either of a criminal nature or something as devastating as massive job losses. And that really goes back to the fact that we need to think about what makes humans different from machines. It might even be the case. There are already people, I've picked this up in some scientific papers that I read recently and popular talks, but there is the idea that even though AI has burst onto the scene, in terms of its inherent capabilities, we might actually be reaching the limit. There's this idea that you have to exponentially have more data to get linear improvements in machine performance. And we are already using massive amounts of computing power. I mean, ChatGPT is just massive. And a lot of the data on the internet has now been harvested for systems like English. So there is the possibility that we are not necessarily now on the bottom of a massive curve that's going to shoot upwards in terms of the capability of machines, but we are probably in a position where we will see it applied in ways that we have never imagined before. And for humans to be able to find a way to use that instead of being used by it or being sidelined by it, I think our ability to use language to express our humanness is essential. Being able to process information critically. I don't think in South Africa we can even imagine what that looks like. We have such low levels of literacy. Imagine 60 million people blogging about something that has happened. People engaging at a high level, perhaps even in their home language, which is somehow more. You can express your personal identity, I think, more clearly in your home language. And although English is obviously the language of discourse that we are using even today, the ability to use language and apply it in a human way is really what I think would go a long way towards immunizing us against the threats, so-called threats of AI. And I think we are actually using AI for exactly that purpose. So we have actively attempted to change the kind of how things are seen typically. We are wielding artificial intelligence in a way that's as ethical as we can possibly make it, for the benefit of humans. And I think if that is encouraged in some way, whether it's by funding or regulation or just by people taking up this challenge, I think using AI to strengthen humans' ability to go about their lives in an informed way, I think is really the only possible way. We can't regulate it away, but we can strengthen our ability to respond to it by something like improving literacy and education.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lotriet. I think that's very insightful from somebody who's got feet on the ground. Thank you very much. Colleagues, I have to apologize. I made a big mistake not seeing that there are hands raised. Sorry, too many streams happening here on my side, and I'm really bad at multitasking. I see that Mr. Ramuado Romeo is on the call, and he's been having his hand up for a long time. I should have acknowledged you sooner, Mr. Romeo. I'm really sorry about that. Please accept my apologies. It was simply an administrative issue. There was no bad intent behind that. Please, I'd like to hand over to you to ask whatever questions or make whatever statements you would like to make. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, could you switch on your video, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no. Okay, I'm trying to switch on the video, but I don't see this system is being controlled that side, so I don't have an option this side. Can I just speak because I can't see the place where I can switch on the video on my side?
Yes, you're welcome. Please feel free.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, we also like to appreciate the Parliament for this session and also inviting us common men and women to participate in this session. So I think we appreciate all the inputs that the speakers have made. I think for us, we as a normal South African, we feel that our government in Parliament in particular is not investing a lot into fourth industrial revolution and the artificial intelligence because we don't have systems in place to start this process from early age in terms like early childhood, in terms of education, and in terms of your primary school, secondary school, and we don't have a lot of also accessible courses in universities that can actually allow a lot of young people who are interested in the space to participate. Because if you look at the global, if you look globally, most of the countries are already pushing the issues of fourth IR and issues of artificial intelligence. Because also in America, a lot of softwares we are using to communicate, whether Zoom meetings, they are actually coming from outside. We are not actually, we are more of consumers. We are not actually creating as a country. So I feel that as the other speaker was speaking, government has got policies, but these policies, they are not necessarily speaking to a common man and woman, let's say who stay in a township or your rural areas. So because, for example, issue of data is very expensive. People are unemployed, people are not working. Wi-Fi, issue of Wi-Fi as well is not accessible. I mean, government has said that they are putting Wi-Fi in municipalities like in Tshwane, your Ekurhuleni and others like your Cape Town, they do have those things. But mostly you'll find that those things are actually in towns. And they're not accessible to people in rural areas. So it's a common thing in South Africa that our politicians, they speak in Parliament. There was a point where I think prior 2020 or so, where the issue of fourth IR was being pushed left and right, TV, but it just died out. So we appreciate also what the CSR is doing, because I mean, going to rural areas and start to engage with the common people on the ground, it helps the young people then to start develop the love and interest in this particular important subject, because the world is moving to this space. It's a space that you can't deny. It's a space that you can't ignore. So it becomes important that we don't just have these sessions to pass time. And for me, I feel like the program of the CSR that is doing schools, it needs to be supported by government, so that it's not just a once-off program. Because if you go there, you know, technology is always evolving, it's always changing. If you go there once off, then it means once we leave, the kids forget. So we need to have this thing to be more sustainable. It needs to be included in our education system. I agree with the other speaker to say that we need to change the way our education system is, because it actually educates people to become consumers instead of educating people to become producers and people who can own the means of production. Because we can't just say talk of what IR when we can't create anything. I mean, international cars are moving automatically. They are driving themselves. China is moving it's actually very far in terms of technology. So the country needs to invest more in technology, so that the issues of what IR and AI can be a reality. There's also a lot of young people in South Africa who are talented. They might not be educated, but they can create these things, but they don't have support system. Thank you. I just wanted to make an input, and we appreciate this opportunity that you have given us. I come from the South African Art and Culture Youth Forum. I'm working with artists and media people on a daily basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romeo. I think you've made very good points. Lots of food for thought. Colleagues, the Deputy Speaker has had to leave our conversation, our session. She conveys her apologies for having to leave early. And please note that she has responded in the chat box to the question that was raised to her. Colleagues, we have lots of questions relating to education. But I would really like to give the other two panelists a chance to just provide their inputs as well. I see I have a hand from Almaine Horn. Almaine, would you like to go ahead? Just indicate to whom is your question directed. Almaine? It seems to me the colleague is struggling to unmute. So while we perhaps just get that right, maybe I can just ask Mr. Jay Moodley. He's another of our panelists. And as I indicated at the beginning, he focuses on extended reality, on artificial intelligence, R&D, and he has a lot of experience in developing these technologies and taking them to industry, to market. And I think some of the questions that I'm seeing here in our chat, in our Q&A, is around concerns around how to manage fairness in AI. So Jay, would you like to give us your thoughts in terms of how can government manage AI fairness, data protection, and infrastructure security, but still remain agile enough to adopt rapid technological changes and promote a capable and innovative state? Thank you.
Hi, Karen, and hello to the audience. Thank you for the opportunity. And I just want to say that all the responses we've been taking from the audience have been really, really great in terms of demonstrating the understanding behind really what's needed and all the key stakeholdership that should be involved in these conversations. So what I will say is that the audience is 100% correct. In the 16 years that I've been working with this technology, and I think speaking to what the previous speakers mentioned of what actually is 4IR technology, what does that mean? And if you look at 4IR technology at its core, what it simply means is interconnected human-centric information systems. And whether you're talking about 4IR in terms of AI or 4IR in terms of blockchain or virtual reality, we always speak of it in a multi-layered approach, which means in all systems, you have to consider the infrastructure, which is the first layer, the processes, the people, and then the security. So in South Africa, what we experience is a lot of disparity in the way we implement technology and research it. Often we find that research is done in silos, implementation is done in silos, and we also have this habit of reinventing the wheel, which we cannot take as an approach to developing for our technology, simply because of the pace of the technology. We simply cannot take a year or 2 years to roll out a policy for AI when products are being developed within 3 to 6 months and outdated as a consequence. So the first step in essentially securing a unified digital governance system is to ensure understanding that policy needs to be addressed together with ongoing conversations of cybersecurity infrastructure, compliance, and monitoring. So what do I mean by that? So over recent years, we've had the implementation of the Joint Standard in Cybersecurity Resilience Requirements that echoes some of the NIST AI 601 standards that the Americans are using. We've also had the introduction of the Information Technology Governance and Risk Management Framework, together with our ongoing work with the National AI Policy. But we need to look at a more cohesive way of combining those efforts in terms of a Digital Ethics and Security Council. And that's for the express mandate of conducting impact assessments on businesses that use AI or have plans of using AI. And so what this would entail is monitoring by means of centralized dashboards and registries, just so that government and industry and the science community has an overview of what tools are being used in industry, why, and what the impact is thereof. Whether it's automation of processes or whether it's cost savings and efficiencies, we have to use that as a forms of declaration first to understand what's going on in these ecosystems. The second thing that we need to do is we need to implement baselines for this, which means that any companies, depending on size, implementing AI for whatever purposes they require, need to be compliant with standards that we set out, not just in context of us as a nation, South Africa, but our underlying BRICS partnerships, because that's essentially how we need to drive policy and impact assessment. We do not need to be reinventing the wheel or establishing anything from scratch when we have partnerships with India and China, and we have models in Rwanda and Korea that are doing exactly what we intend to do. The second tier is infrastructure resilience, and this has been a lot of focus in terms of conversation about how do we roll out secure cybersecurity infrastructure, and then how do we manage that and monitor that. So that would involve a forum similar to the National Critical Infrastructure Protection Center. And if you look at the work that's being done regarding cybersecurity in terms of the South African National Defense Force, in terms of CSIR, and in terms of international industry that's coming into the country, transferring technology and skills, there's a lot of domain expertise that can be leveraged within those areas, but it requires a cohesive forum. And the third and final tier would need to address the issues of compliance, which is, okay, we know which businesses and industries in the country have the highest AI use, and we know why it's being used, but we need to ensure that future AI is rolled out with compliance. And compliance becomes a big issue because if you think of anything from ChatGPT to YouTube, to any one of these applications, even if you're using Gmail at the moment, you are subject to AI. So whether you're a 6-year-old or a 60-year-old, this is ubiquitous, pervasive technology. And if you look at the population pyramid of South Africa, you see that about 30% of the nation is below the age of 16, and around 60% of the population is around 16 to 60. And so what that represents is a large working class. And if we address that in terms of 4IR, it means that in terms of industry, we have a large workforce that's subject to two things: digital transformation in terms of learning new tools, and also workforce displacement. So in terms of compliance, we also need to make sure that besides just looking at the businesses that use AI, we also look at this concept called shadow AI, which is a large gap in our current initiatives, strategic initiatives. And a lot of people ask the question, what is shadow AI? Shadow AI is simply you using ChatGPT to do your homework, to do your research, and the company is not aware of it. And this represents a huge risk to business as well. When you consider over the past 1.5 years, the use of AI tools has risen by 900%. That's over the past 18 months. And of this use, between 40 to 50% is shadow AI, which is workers using ChatGPT and the like to do their work. So the trend following that is it's going to increase to about 75%. So looking at the monitoring and compliance of infrastructure in relation to industry alone is not enough. We need to look at what workers are doing and how it's being used. And then finally, when we talk about 4IR, it's with digital inclusion of policy, of people, and of practice. And the audience there would be right again in saying that together we're taking this top-down approach of discussing things on a higher level in terms of economics and the ongoing trade sanctions against us and USAID. USAID accounts for 112 programs, of which digital economy and digital literacy is a large proponent. So all of these are economic components that feed into our risk and challenges as a nation. But this is why, as the audience mentioned, besides just looking at what coding curriculums we can implement in schools, we need to be looking at digital bridging qualifications and micro certifications, because we cannot educate a child on how to code when the same child is using ChatGPT unethically to do their homework. But this would also enable now, because of these systems, more localized innovation hubs. And these localized innovation hubs, in terms of a South African context, fit beautifully in terms of we have 3 capitals, which means 3 centers of decision making, and that segregates our security systems and our information systems quite nicely. And what we need to do is focus on expanding that into distributed provincial systems and innovation hubs that are not situated at these urban smart city corporate centers, but more so in community centers. It's where we can drive education of generative AI with the youth and with industry, small businesses.
Thank you. I'm sorry that I have to sort of halt you there. Very, very interesting comments. Thank you so much. And I think you've also almost started solutioning some of the issues that we've got and really addressing many of the questions that I'm seeing in the Q&A. Colleagues, we have a hand up from Professor Lindelo Snell-Gamtuse. Professor Mtuse, would you like to ask your question and just indicate to me who it is word is.
Thank you. Well, my question is actually at everyone. I actually have 3 questions, but I'll try and keep them nice and neat. The first question is, we've got several policies, strategies, the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission report, which is now also becoming ancient. What are government's plans to concretize drafting substantive legislation on AI? What is government's plan on that? The second question I have, we have a whole lot of regulators that have been created in terms of our law. What plans do we have to engage the existing regulators on matters of AI? Because that seemingly is something that's not being discussed. And then lastly, have we not learned from the last 25 years, and I'm referring to the ECT Act and the Cybercrimes Act, the fact that we've had different silos, Department of Communications doing this, Justice is doing that. We see now science and technology is also busy with something. Can't we just all come together? Can't we come together with academia? That's what academia's role is, by the way, to discuss these matters with Parliament and get on with it. Those are my 3 questions. Thank you.
Brilliant questions, and I think spot on. I think in one way, this series of webinars is trying to achieve just that. And I think we've already today seen quite a few topics that we need to elaborate more on in upcoming webinars. But let me ask of the panel members, is there anybody who would like to address that specifically? The question of a more unified approach to policy development and strategy development. DDG Morfe?
I'll address only part of that because I think I would really want my DCDT colleague to tackle that one if it is possible. I think Prof raises a very important question in terms of how we can actually draw from academia, work with our research entities, and then, but most critically, also the communities. I think one of the points that my DCDT colleague mentioned, which is very crucial, is how do we actually also consider engagement and actually raising awareness of some of these things with the ordinary citizens. Because they have got a role to play, and also for us to make sure that when we talk about AI and we talk about 4IR, we also have an element of context and relevance in it. Now, I mentioned earlier on the work that we have been working with other departments on the strategies for AI. So that is really quite a much broader engagement. But most importantly, really at government-wide, we have started a process of making sure that all relevant government departments for a particular policy are actually consulted as the drafting occurs. And then there are various processes around how you engage other stakeholders. And by the way, I'm not aware there could be, but in most instances, when we lead the development of these kind of strategies, and I give an example, just end of last year, we've just gone through the approval of the circular economy strategy, that it involves both the research entities, academia, and we also have various consultations with communities, because we do not monopolize knowledge as government. And I think also our science entities like the CSIR are aware that they also don't. So when we are able to bring the technical capabilities that sit somewhere, the policy and strategy, and also the academia, and just the experience by the ordinary citizens, we are able to bring a better product. So Prof, what you're saying is very important, and is something that, as we keep getting better at things, where there are gaps, we have to deal with that. Thanks very much.
Sorry, I'm trying to read multiple messages. Yeah. Colleagues, thank you. I do believe that our colleague from DCDT, Mr. Moto, also earlier referred to some of the initiatives that the DCDT is undertaking and is planning to undertake to address this whole issue of collaborative policy development and regulator, etc., etc. So perhaps what we need is a future webinar specifically focused on policy and the regulatory environment, because it seems to be generating a lot of interest today. Colleagues, I would just like to give our last panelist, Dr. Sunveer Matadine, a chance to just also give us his views. And Dr. Matadine, I want to ask you specifically, you come from the robotics environment. And I think that there is a lot of anxiety in society about jobs being lost, about how robots are going to take over our lives, etc., about black boxes that we don't know what is going on inside, and so on. Would you like to give us just your thoughts on how robotics and automation will displace the human workforce or not displace the human workforce on a sort of larger scale? And do you think that we as South Africa are going to suffer that? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kalto. Thank you for the question. If you just give me a few seconds while ChatGPT generates an answer for me.
Good one.
No, jokes, everyone. Hello, everybody. So in my view, there's various factors that will influence this, but it should not be the case for South Africa. Technology does not have to be a one-size-fits-all. The mix and shape of the technologies that we choose to deploy will and must depend on the functionality that's needed and the social and economic conditions of the company or the country or the industry for that matter. So this fear, although understandable, is based largely on international stats and predictions and international OEM behavior, but it does not need to be the case for South Africa, and there's various reasons for that. From a socio-economic perspective, the age of our workforce here in South Africa. Let me first pivot to Japan and places in Europe and other countries that have an aging population. Their youthful workforce is in decline, so they have a short pipeline, so it will not be replenished. So it only makes sense for them to look at automation and robotics to be competitive and to remain producers. But the same doesn't apply to South Africa or Africa for that matter. We are the youngest continent. 60% of our people are under the age of 25. So it doesn't make sense to do mass job replacements using mechanization. From a financial perspective, mass mechanization costs a huge amount of money. There's a large upfront capital investment that needs to be made. And it generally works where you have large volume production of similar or single products. You have large order books over long periods of time, and that's the only way you're going to realize that return on investment that you've made. From a technical or a functional perspective, not every process can be automated. So there's some extremely complex physical processes that still require human agility, both intellectually and physically. So in my view, there'll be a happy balance. And that will come in the form of a hybrid model consisting of 3 elements. One would be automation where it makes sense. The other would be a manual or a human workforce where that makes sense. And the most exciting part to me is human-centered automation, where we talk augmented labor forces. And this is through exoskeletons, for example. So exoskeletons will be the physical aspect of human augmentation. So think Iron Man. Exoskeletons will help increase your strength, stamina, safety of the workforce. And although Iron Man may be fictional, there are examples in the medical space, in the defense space, even in the manufacturing space, where exoskeletons are being used. We at the CSIR are also working in that space. Now, I've built one or two in my garage, although it looks nothing like Tony Stark's, but it gets the job done. Intellectual augmentation will come via connectivity and augmented reality. So it will allow the human to be physically plugged in or access a database with any amount of information that they need at that point where they are doing the work. So to answer the question, I don't really see that playing out in South Africa. What I see playing out in South Africa is a self-balancing hybrid model that will take all of these elements into consideration. Doctor, you're still muted.
Yes, and if you do that, then no automation works anyway. Thank you very, very much, Sinvira. I think those are very insightful comments, and it's great to hear what the Center for Robotics is doing at CSIR. Thank you very much for that. Colleagues, so we have a few questions. We have many questions in the chat. In the Q&A, we have far too many questions to be able to actually answer all of them today. So I think what we will do is maybe pick out a few more until about 10 to 12, and then we will start wrapping up. And whichever questions have not been answered live, we will respond to them in writing. I want to pick up on one around something that was mentioned earlier on, and I think it is a very practical question asked by Mr. Rus from the DA. Mr. Rus asks, from a broad viewpoint, an 4IR regulatory framework must balance innovation and trust or protection. So both law and regulation play a role. And in each of these spheres, hard and soft laws and regulations are employed. What would the panelists or the presenters advise MPs are urgent areas of law and regulations that we need to focus on? So we've had some conversations about making sure that there is synergy between the various regulatory frameworks that we develop to deal with the implementation of AI in the country. But if you were able to crystallize some of the urgent areas that MPs should be focusing on, any of the panelists, or in fact, I think anybody on the webinar, if you have thoughts in this regard, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll take a response. I think Mr. Moto has already previously or earlier alluded to the need for connectivity, for instance. But I see a hand from Agnetha. Go ahead, Agnetha.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I think that the question from Mr. Ruiz is actually also one of the key objectives of the series of webinars, because what we do find is that there is a lack of regulatory framework within our space as Parliament. So I think that if we could agitate as policymakers that from a parliamentary perspective, we need to explore what would be that legislative framework for us to be able to execute our oversight over the executive within the 4IR space. Somebody also alluded to the fact that as much as we do start developing policy, the policy must also then sort of evolve as the implementation of the technologies are also evolving. So I think what Mr. Russ is also asking is the fact that, so as it's also rapidly unfolding, how do we then ensure that, as you've mentioned, crystallize this the regulatory systems within the 4IR space. And also, somebody also alluded to centralizing a centralized system in which to monitor each and every 4IR AI technologies that are emerging. And I think through that centralized processing of it, it would also assist us as Parliament to then look at what would a legislative framework then look like for us as Parliament. So I think it is something that we then, through this process, I would envisage that we do agitate for that. And I think also coming from the members as well, the parliamentary members, the executive authority, we could agitate in that space that we actually look at what would a legislative framework be for us as Parliament, because as it stands, we don't really have a substantive framework for us to conduct this oversight. And as Dr. Lotriet has indicated in her address, where she stated that we as the parliamentary researchers, content advisors, in other words, the administration supporting the work of the committees, that all committees should actually be agitating for such a framework, so that as we conduct our oversight in our various committees, which ultimately is conducting oversight across the sectors, we then should be able to know how and what it is that we are actually exercising that oversight. So I thank you for that question, Mr. Riss, and we trust that Dr. Lotriet will assist us to, further agitate for these kind of initiatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Agneta. Lotriet?
Thank you very much, Karen. I know nothing about policy making, but what I would urge policymakers is perhaps to be very cognizant of the fact that South Africa has few resources, generally speaking. And that, in our space at least, that means usually having to come up with innovative ways of applying and developing AI. And so the danger is always in centralizing or over-regulating. It might actually in South Africa hinder the ability of South Africans to spot a problem and solve it. If there's too much of a focus on a overly centralized approach to AI. We are, in a certain sense, pioneering. There's no other country with these amount of official languages with the mandate to treat them equitably, the levels of literacy. So South Africa's situation is unique, and I would urge policymakers to consider that and leave enough room for innovators without adding too much regulatory burden. We don't have just our economic situation and everything about that would I think we would do better with a distributed approach in some sense.
Thank you. Yeah, it's different. Jay?
Hi, Karen. Yeah, so I'd like to say as a point of priority, there's two specific areas we need to look at, and it's to do with vulnerabilities to our national security. So if you look at headlines making the news, we've had recent occurrences of political unrest in Congo and Mozambique. And what a lot of people have realized from that is, although the country is not engaged in joint warfare, we are engaged in peacekeeping and conflict management as part of our UN initiatives, Action for Peacekeeping. And the military itself has the AI Research Unit, which they've established and are making use of. The AI unit focuses on 5G interconnectivity, AI systems, and extended realities. It's for conflict prevention and joint warfare. So this would secure the country. But from an industry perspective, we also need to be focusing on foreign investment. International companies that operate within the country have the largest impact and revenue spend on AI systems. These big conglomerates are often run, just like we see in today's politics, by technology oligarchs. And so our approach should be to secure our information systems from ongoing threats from other countries and secure our workforce through training programs and regulation of international businesses and how they use AI systems within the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Look, I'm looking through all of the questions and answers here, and I'm realizing that we have some very nice guidance from these for some future webinars. We have mentioned, and DDG Morphy mentioned earlier on as well, about the Foundational Digital Capabilities Research Platform. That platform focuses on 5 domains. It focuses on artificial intelligence, robotics, and cybernetics as one domain. It focuses on modeling and simulation. It focuses on cloud computing, networking, and advanced Internet of Things. And then there's a domain for cybersecurity and blockchain. And then there is a domain for what Jay was talking about now in terms of XR, VR, and mixed reality. And I think that what I'm seeing from the questions here, that I think it would be really good if we were able to maybe have a webinar for each of those domains, because there are questions here around connectivity and what's happening around connectivity and infrastructure, and data storage, and how can we do that in a way that it can have a further reach. There are questions about the warfare aspect that you've just brought up, Jay, which I think can be addressed in a webinar on that. There are questions about blockchain, which I think we can, it's a whole topic on its own that we can discuss. And I see also a question or two on the metaverse, Jay. So I think that even though we will respond to these questions in writing, colleagues, we will also take some guidance from these questions to draft the program for the rest of the webinar series that we're planning. So please, feel free to give us any other questions or any other ideas on subjects that you would like us to explore in future webinars. But I think we are ready to wrap up today. So I would like to hand over to Ms. Linda Stofile, who's a senior researcher in the Parliament, South African Parliament, to give us the way forward, which I've sort of started doing, sorry, and a vote of thanks. Thanks, Mr. Stofile.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm in the office. My picture does not show well. However, I think the voice can be heard. Am I audible enough?
You're perfectly audible.
Okay. Okay, colleagues, once more from my side, I would like to express a gratitude from you, Karen, and the team, the research unit from Parliament led by Dr. Arendse, for organizing this well-informed, insightful webinar. In absentia, I would like to extend the gratitude to the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Dr. Lotriet, Dr. Mbonani from the department, and the Parliament. We've seen a number of participants rising from 133, and as we're ending now, we're almost 159. So we are grateful for the participants for their insights and inputs on this project. So we take nothing for granted. Karen, the discussions of today, they just reminded me that when we started this series in the 6th Parliament, the take home from that 6th Parliament webinar, we said no one must be left out. And we were looking forward to have a consolidative, collaborative effort which is where CSIR and the Department of Science and Innovation are coming through, so that we work as partners to educate South Africans. We call ideas from the South Africans towards a space where we'll have the kind of the legislation that will suit all. Karen, before I end or before I say my last words, this webinar, there are a few take-homes that I've noticed from both the participants, the speakers. The first one is the issue of ethical innovation. It came strongly. Policy requirements or policy development, the infrastructure needs, taking everybody on board. So making sure that it is well understood, the concept of innovation is understood by all. The issue of digital trust environment, it also came strongly. So while I'm saying all this, or while I'm emphasizing on these pointers, I wish to appreciate the inputs. And as you've already said, I concur with you, Karen. These discussions are leading us to our next webinar, because this is not the end, or this is not the beginning and the end. We are starting a series of webinars. Lastly, I wish to assure the participants that all responses or the report will be made available. So all the inputs will be packaged in the report format and will be available for the public and as a form of a feedback to all the stakeholders who are part of this engagement. So current colleagues and the Office of the Deputy Speaker in absentia, with those words, on behalf of the Parliamentary Research Unit, Parliament at large, kindly note our sincere gratitude and appreciation for being part of this project. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Fila. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for the technical team in the background. Thank you to our panel members for all of your contributions and your thoughts, and especially thank you to all the participants and attendees. And I think that we can watch this space. There are big things to come. So with those few words, colleagues, this webinar is now closed. Have a good day further and all of the best in all of your work. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.